what is probably like the 20th take of this history revision stream. Man, the witch craze topic sucks. I hate this topic with a burning passion. It is thankfully the last history paper we do, but also it's worth 30% of our grade. So, yeah, this is one that we have to learn, and I hate the fact that we have to learn it. Tomorrow we have a mock for the witch craze, and it's either going to be on Bamberg or East Anglia. Both of which are like these case studies that we have to do. We have to do 5 in total. I don't even recall the names of all of them. That's how bad it is. North Berwick, Lancashire, Bamberg, East Anglia, Salem. Okay, I do know the names of them. I'm lying. But anyways, what I wanted to do today was revise, go over Bamberg, go over East Anglia, and I'll do that, but I want to do it differently because I have found that this textbook here is useless, right? It's a pile of yap. It's yapping about so much, and you only need a sliver of this information for exams. So, that is where I have gone and found this, which is indicative contents of past paper questions. Yes, the past paper method from GCSE. The idea is this year, 2025, there won't be a copy and paste of these questions, right? I pull up this 2020 question. How far do you agree that the causes of the East Anglian witch craze were primarily economic? That question's not coming up again, but the information will come up. If we get asked about East Anglia, all of this information is still true. So, that is my strategy for revision. So, that is a question on East Anglia. Those are questions on Salem. That's skepticism. That's skepticism. Shit. That's skepticism. Wow, okay, there's a lot of skepticism questions. That's a skepticism question. Oh my god. That is a science revolution question. That's a science revolution question. Oh my god, why are there so many? That's a science revolution. That's also one. Okay. Those are all irrelevant. And this is a Bamberg question, okay. That's an East Anglia question. That's a Bamberg question. That's a Bamberg question. And that's it. Okay. So. Out of every past paper question in existence, this is everything about East Anglia and Salem. So, all we're going to do is revise using these. Okay. So, we'll start off with Bamberg, which I think is probably the more difficult out of the two. Purely because some of the names are German and they're a lot harder to stick in your head. But anyways, Bamberg. Okay. So, There is a past paper question here on the process of accusations. There is a question on von Dornheim. And there is a question on the influence of Ferdinand II and the Imperial Chamber Court. Okay. And these are pretty spread out. 2020, 21, and 23. Okay. So, let's start with, I think it's going to be the context. This is the process of accusations in Bamberg and the nature of the beliefs in witches. So this is going to be the context work here. Okay. Sticking this up, let's have a look. So, we'll split this into half. So this is like the context. Okay. So to begin with, knowledge. The judicial control that the prince-bishops had increased the level of persecution. The location of Bamberg as a Catholic state near to a number of Protestant areas meant religious tensions were a significant cause, and individuals like von Dornheim enabled witch hunting. Okay, very good information there. The location of Bamberg. So Bamberg was a Catholic state, but due to the whole 30 Years' War and the tension, the reclaiming of land of the Catholic Empire, it means that it was near Protestants. Catholic state near Protestant areas. And obviously as a result of that, high religious tensions. So, already, that is a huge thing that you could literally base a paragraph on right there. The Catholic state. Bamberg is a Catholic state, but it's near Protestant areas. Therefore, there's high religious tension, which was a major cause for the witch hunts. Then there's also the control of the judicial system that the prince-bishops had. Judicial control that the prince-bishops had increased the level of persecution. So that's bullet point 1. And obviously, finally, is von Dornheim, who was very responsible. So already, just from that single past paper question, we have all this information. So in an exam, if you were asked a question, it could be completely irrelevant to the context, but you could still mention a lot of this. So that is good. Some other things. The nature of the source, the idea that so the thing is with the reading questions is literally like you can infer a good 80% just from the source. So this source here, you can infer the fact that it uses witnesses as part of the accusation. The source doesn't tell you that, but you can infer it. And that's true. It indicates that torture was used to extract confessions. That's true. Meaning there's no chance for an individual to maintain their innocence. You can then obviously confirm this by saying, people like von Dornheim enabled it. So, that right there has already given us a large piece of a puzzle. 30-year war disrupted the norms of everyday life and enabled the witch hunts. So we should also mention that, yeah. 30-year war, everyday life disrupted. Because of that, it led to increased tensions. So, we'll talk about it being brought to an end in a tad, but for now, how far was von Dornheim responsible for the extent of the witch hunts? So, he was Prince Bishop, and his absolute belief in witches enabled extensive witch hunting with about 900 killed. So, already, we're going to take this to this side. Obviously talk about his role, Prince Bishop. What does that mean, him being a Prince Bishop? It means that he believed in witches. He believes in witches. And that is a very good statistic, 900 plus killed while he was Prince Bishop. That is a very good statistic. The complete judicial control that Prince Bishops had increased the levels of persecution. So that is another factor there. And you can link that to the ending of the Bamberg trials as well. The idea that because Dornheim had such power over the judiciary system, he was able to get away with ignoring the emperor's request a lot because of that power that he had. The construction of a witch house, which incorporated a torture chamber, on the orders of Dornheim, further encouraged and enabled the use. And he used to give sermons on witchcraft and magic, given by Fauna. So Frederick Fauna, that is another important character. Fauna, he used sermons on witchcraft. So that is an important person I completely forgot. So you have von Dornheim, who is on this power-hungry spree, becoming incredibly wealthy, but you also have Frederick Fauna, who gave sermons to further encourage witch hunting. So already, just from these two past paper questions, you could write a pretty decent paragraph here. If you were asked, I don't fucking know. Honestly, I don't know what kinds of questions you could get asked, to be honest. But what is this question asked? How far was he responsible for the extent of the Huns? Then already you could say that no, he wasn't responsible. It was actually the context behind Bamberg, the idea that it was religious tensions being responsible for the Huns, which was only amplified by the 30-year war, which disrupted tensions. Or you could say, yes, it was Dornheim because he increased judiciary control. His role as a Prince Bishop means if he believed in witches, everyone else followed, and he had 900 killed as a result. Let's have a look at the other ones. The location of Bamberg being, yes, religious tension, as we've already wrote. Economic hardship was caused. So, for example, adverse weather. The cold and wet 1920s, the frost of 1926. So, that's another one you could write a paragraph about. Economic failure. Crop failure due to weather. The 30-year war disrupted the norms of everyday life. The war weakened the imperial court and the control of the church. Okay, that is a good point. So, finally, the Carolina Law Code, which permitted the use of torture, and the belief that witches did not act alone. And then those accused had to name accomplices, which increased the extent. So, that is good. Let's keep going on with finally the ending of the trials. So this is how far do you agree? Oh no. Where is it? Here. That one. How far do you agree that it was Ferdinand II and the Imperial Court that led to the ending of the Bamberg trials? So we've looked at all of our reasons for it happening. We haven't looked as much at the middle, the actual trials themselves, but we can talk about that briefly. Anyways, the whole idea here, I already know this, is Dorothy Flock. She was arrested, so wife of a councillor. She was arrested, relatives appealed, and the Pope told them to stop, but obviously Donheim didn't. So already, the case of Dorothy Flock shows that there was an increased skepticism. Tensions over the correct legal procedure brought increased attention to the witch hunts by Ferdinand, as trials in Bamberg had not been carried out. So that's another reason. Cases of witchcraft, which should have been heard in civil courts, were heard in secret by commissions. And growing skepticism was clear from the complaints made to both religious and imperial courts about innocent people being accused. So, innocence. The cost of trials over 9 years was causing the town to go bankrupt. So these are other factors. Donheim issued a proclamation against false accusations and punished those who made them. Witch hunting was no longer a priority for authorities. And finally, the arrival of the Swedish army took over administration and Bamberg fled. So, So. I might actually. What I might do is I might clip this bit. I know that you probably can't read all of this, but I'll quickly go over everything. So this is everything to do with the beginning of Bamberg and the kind of ending. I haven't talked much here about the middle of Bamberg, like the nature of the trials, but I think that this should be fine. So the context behind it, a key point is it's a Catholic state near Protestant areas, causing religious tensions, that being a reason for witch accusations. Another reason for witch accusations is the 30 Years' War, in which everyday life was disrupted, the imperial court was weakened, and so was the church's influence. Another reason for accusations was economic failure, led by crop failure due to the shit weather. Another reason for accusations were the Carolina laws, in which witches had to name others, leading to obviously this domino effect of accusations. Frederick Fauna used to host sermons to encourage witch hunting. He would host sermons about witches and witchcraft, which would encourage people to, it would spread this fear of witches. And finally, the most significant factor, I would say, is von Dornheim. He was a prince bishop, which meant he was highly influential, he believed in witches, and he had 900 of them killed. Von Dornheim enabled Fauna to do sermons, and because of a weakened imperial court, von Dornheim was able to get away with a lot more because of that. Then, when the trials began to come to an end, it was due to all of these factors. The Carolina laws, which were supposed to be carried out during these witch hunts, were not correctly carried out in the trials, and Dornheim ignored them. He executed people in secret, he held secret trials, and this led to an increased focus on Bamberg because they were not being followed correctly. Pretty sure the Emperor, I think you can probably just get away with calling him the Emperor Ferdinand, I think. He, I think, reissued the Carolina laws a lot of times to try and get Dornheim to follow them, but he never once did. So yeah, the trials weren't correctly carried out by Dornheim, leading to an increased focus. Dornheim would go on to make a massive mistake by accusing Dorothy Flock, who is the wife to a councillor in Bamberg, and this case would get the attention of the Pope because, she was falsely accused, and of course, if the Pope is telling Dornheim to stop, but he's still going to execute her, that's going to lead to a lot of skepticism and doubt about his role. He held secret trials, which eventually Ferdinand became aware of, and the Emperor himself ends the trials once he gets a lot of, I guess, letters informing him that innocent people were being accused. The other reasons for the trials ending is Dornheim punished those who actually made false accusations. So a bit of contrast there. The limitation to the Emperor being responsible for ending the trials is that Dornheim himself did do this to make an effort to stop it. Another reason, completely irrelevant to Dornheim, is it was very costly. The trials were so costly that 9 years that the trials happened for led to Bamberg being bankrupt. Again, combine that with previous economic failure. And finally, the impact of the 30 Years' War led to a declining population. Therefore, witch hunting becomes less of a priority. And the Swedish army led to Dornheim running away because they're gonna fucking kill him. So, overall, I'm just gonna try and take a screenshot here as best I can. Okay. Overall, if we got asked an exam question now on Emperor Ferdinand, we would be looking at this bit here. We'd be looking at that bit. As you'll agree, the case of Dorothy Flock, which he was involved in, Carolina laws. Your counter-argument would be the rest of this. If you were asked a question on the role of Dornheim, your agree would be, this kind of section here, that section. Your disagree would be that section. It's like a web. If you were asked the impact of the 30 Years' War on Bamberg, you would obviously be able to talk a lot about how that enabled Dornheim, how the 30-Year War led to the ending of the Huns as much as it did begin them. So, it is a web. It is a complete web of information here, but that is all the indicative content. Oh, hello. I'm so sorry I didn't see that message. That is all the content that I've been able to pick up just from the mark schemes. So again, this isn't going to go as into depth, but that is a lot of good knowledge to get for a basis. So, we've talked about Bamberg in depth. Again, I haven't talked specifically about the middle, which I'm a bit worried about now. Like the middle, but I don't know what else there is to talk about. Like, oh, he built a prison to torture witches. I don't know if we need to know anything else. You know what? I'll do the unforgivable sin, and we'll look at the textbook very quickly just to see if. Again, it's saying economic crises, inflation, economic crisis. Okay. The number of people executed was 900. We already have that information. Women made up a lot of them because they were more likely to be accused. Yep, you could include that. Social classes. Again, I feel like most of this information in the textbook is kind of a lot of bollocks. Like, obviously it's true, but I don't know whether we would need to know any of this. The use of torture. Oh, and property confiscations. That's something I completely missed. There would be property confiscations. So if you were accused and you had a house, it would be taken off you, which I believe that led to more wealthy people being accused. The mark scheme makes no reference to this, so I would tread a little carefully when talking about it. But if a textbook is saying that property was confiscated, I feel like that would be something pretty significant to mention. Let's have a look. The use of torture was used. Cool. Okay, here. The law in Bamberg allowed for the confiscation of witches' property, which encouraged the persecution of the upper classes. Yes. So, I don't know what question you could get asked where you could refer to that. Maybe if you were asked a question about von Dornheim and it was... Or one of the extract questions. If the extract is by some upper class guy, you could make reference to property confiscations and the idea that that would lead to wealthy being accused. Okay, that's some good knowledge, man. The victims were all responsible for their court what they were. Oh my god, why can't I read? The victims were all responsible for all of their court costs. Okay. Yes, Fauna. He provided a framework for the hunts. Fauna was able to make a connection between sin and witchcraft. So he basically believed in using torture because he believed that that would lead to more effective results. Cool. So, that is everything about Bamberg. Again, I'm going to try and take a screenshot, but my phone is like... Can I move that down a little? Okay. Right. So, that is all of Bamberg. Jesus Christ. Okay. So, very quickly before I rub all of this off, I'll just recap everything again. The idea of it being a Catholic state increased religious tensions. That was a major cause for witch accusations. The 30-Year War was a major reason as well because it weakened the court system, it weakened the church, which enabled Dornheim to get away with a lot more. Economic failure was a reason for the witch hunts, being bad weather, which obviously people would begin to point fingers because they didn't understand fuck all. Carolina laws led to increased accusations because it was mandatory to name other witches if you were accused. Frederick Fauna was another person who delivered sermons similar to Cotton Mather's father, but actually kind of the opposite, because I think Mather's father was a reason for the ending of the trials, but Fauna encouraged witch hunting and especially encouraged torture. So did Dornheim, because he built a fucking torture prison, but Dornheim is a significant reason. His role as a prince bishop got 900 killed because he believed in witches. He would confiscate property, leading to the wealthy class being accused. He accused Dorothy Flock, who was the wife of a councillor, yada yada. Honestly, I would argue Bamberg is one of the nicer ones, purely because, like, it's not that bad. All you need to know is that Dornheim was a bit of a prick. You need to know that, you know, the 30-Year War was a bit annoying. And that's basically it. Like, in fact, how much... Okay, what time? What time is it? I don't know. I'll quickly draw this. Right. Bamberg. I will quickly draw this very crude graph chart. Obviously, Dornheim was impacted by the 30 Years' War because that was less imperial court influence, allowing him to get away with a lot. Carolina laws, which obviously were a reason for the ending of the trials as well. And the other reason, what was the other reason? Obviously him being a prince bishop. Oh, I guess it just being a Catholic country, like Catholic. Dorothy Flock. Bernadette II. 30 Years' War would lead to the end of... So, that is an insane graph, but in other words, it kind of highlights everything about Bamberg here. Dornheim is central to it all. In fact, hold on, let me colour code this. This will be all the reasons for it starting. And then blue will be all the reasons for it ending. So, the 30 Years' War started and ended it. Obviously, with the arrival of the Swedish army, Dornheim fled, leading to the end. The 30-Year War significantly reduced the population of Bamberg, leading to a lesser focus. So that's that. That's that bit. I'll just talk about each bit quickly to nail it in. Economic failure obviously started the witch hunts in a way. You could argue as one of your paragraphs, of course. Because of the poor harvest, because of the bad weather, the frost, which obviously would lead to people scapegoating. It was also a reason for the end of the hunts, because after 9 years, and things like property confiscations, it resulted in the end of the hunts because people couldn't afford it anymore. And Dornheim became very rich. Obviously, the 30-Year War, as I say, started the hunts as well. I don't know what I said, actually. The 30-Year War started the hunts because there was less power in the church, less power in the imperial courts, which would enable Dornheim. Obviously, Bamberg being a Catholic state, surrounded by Protestant areas, led to increased religious tensions. Obviously, fauna was a reason as well. He would give sermons about witchcraft, which would obviously increase witch accusations, enabling the witch hunts. And he also strongly promoted the use of torture because that's what he believed in. And therefore, them two kind of go hand in hand there. The role of torture in Bamberg, you probably won't get asked that, but obviously, Dornheim also enabled torture by building a fucking prison. Then obviously the Carolina laws are a reason for the trials beginning, because they enabled people to make accusations if you were accused yourself. They're a reason for it ending because Fernandad obviously realised that Dornheim wasn't following the Carolina laws, and despite reappealing them multiple times, he still didn't follow them, which eventually got official involvement of the imperial court in. And then, of course, finally, Dornheim himself was a prince bishop. He got 900 people executed overall. He believed in witches. He believed in torture. He obviously allowed fauna to push whatever yap he was on about. He accused Dorothy Flock, who was the wife to a councillor in Bamberg. Because of him doing that, it got official involvement from the Pope. He held secret trials in order to still kill her. Obviously, that got Fernandad's involvement, again, because of the Carolina laws, because he wasn't following them. And that led to the end of the trials. So overall, that is Bamberg. Completely covered, I think. I think that's Bamberg completely covered, and I'm fucking sweating. So, what I'm doing is I will wrap up there now, okay? And later tonight, we will go on, and we will go do the exact same for East Anglia. We will literally do the exact same Exact same method. Looking at the past paper, looking at the context, looking at the reasons for it ending. And obviously we will create a web, again, of all of the reasons for it beginning, all the reasons for it ending, and all those little things in the middle that you might get asked to. So, hope this helped. Obviously that was a lot, just for Bamberg. But I think that's really going to stick in my head now. I really think it will. The idea of it being caused due to economic reasons, Dornheim, the 30-Year War, the religious tensions, the Carolina laws themselves. So that's 5 reasons for it beginning. Fernandad, the Carolina laws, the economic state of Bamberg, the case of Dorothy Flock, obviously, and the Imperial Court. That's 5 reasons for it ending. Then obviously the use of torture, fauna, property confiscations. That is literally a perfect essay structure. Real quick, what I'll do. Literally a perfect essay structure here. You could just pick any one of those 3 and write about it. If you're asked about the context, the trials themselves, or the ending. So, if you were asked about the context of if you were... Right, hypothetical exam question. Von Dornheim was the most significant reason for beginning the trials in Bamberg. You would agree? Saying yes, it was him. You would disagree, you would say it's actually due to economic reasons. You would disagree again, you would say it was due to fauna. Or you could literally swap those out for anything. You could swap that out for the 30 Years' War. You could swap economic out for, literally whatever, the Carolina laws. I would probably have it be a paragraph on Dornheim, a paragraph combining a couple of things. I would probably combine the Carolina laws, the economic, and then obviously it being a Catholic state too. And then the 30-Year War, you could have a whole paragraph on. You could talk about the impact of that, how it led to religious tensions. If you were asked a question on the nature of the trials themselves, that's where you would mention the influence of fauna, giving sermons, encouraging torture, which in itself could be a paragraph talking about Dornheim's involvement there. And obviously property confiscations. And finally, the ending of the trials themselves. Let's say you were asked a question, Fernandad II was the most important reason. You would agree? You would say it was because of him and the Carolina laws. You could disagree. You could say it was actually the case of Flock, which brought a lot of skepticism because he held it in secret. I forgot to mention, obviously, I wrote it, but Fernandad and the whole idea of innocent people being accused. And obviously, your other argument could be economic reasons. Obviously, Dornheim became rich while the whole town suffered. And, you can mention that. You could also mention the Carolina laws themselves. So, what I have literally just done there is done 3 hypothetical essay plans. That's literally what I've just done. In fact, you know what? Get rid of Carolina laws. Put the 30-Year War. That's easier. I've literally just done 3 essay plans. Plan 1 is saying Dornheim was most significant reason for trials. That's an exam question right there. Obviously written more formally, but that could be an exam question. Dornheim was the most significant reason for the trials. How far do you agree? Second question. on the nature of the trials, that could be one of the source questions. One of the sources show you about the nature of the trials. Obviously, you wouldn't then write it as a 3-part essay, but you could mention these as bits of knowledge. And finally, the ending of the trials, that would be an exam question. You could say Ferdinand II was most significant reason for ending trials. And it doesn't matter what. Replace Ferdinand II with the case of Dorothy Flock. Replace Ferdinand II with the 30-Year War. Replace Ferdinand II with economic reasons. You're still going to be using the exact same information. That is why using this indicative content is the best way to revise. Because no matter what question you get asked, it's the exact same knowledge. That's why I love revising that way. Instead of saying Dornheim was the most significant reason, you could... Right, this might be a question but would like make me shit my pants. Hello. But if I pull up to the exam and the question is, the economic state of Bamberg was the most significant reason for the beginning of the trials, a lot of people would shit themselves thinking, what the fuck, I don't know anything about the economic state of Bamberg. But that would only be one part of your... That would only be one part of your knowledge, you know. You would mention the economic state, but then you could also wrap that in nicely with other things. So, that is it for now. I'll obviously be live later because I need to cover East Anglia. But I will see you guys in a bit. I hope this has been of use. And yeah, goodbye.